There's always a moment in these cartoons that I love. And the one part in the Jungle Book that I felt like they really missed out on was Shere Khan is this terrifying, like, psychopath of a character. And as a child, you don't really realize that, he's a charming tiger, but there's a lot of danger behind him. And the way that George Sanders voiced the character in the cartoon, it just has the cocktail party, psycho who could like strangle you in the bathroom,
He's like
or something.
James Bond villain almost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a really good way of putting it.
You are watching You Got It with Warrior Woman 91. Thank you again for watching this video, and also please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and ring the bell to get notifications, because I don't know why I say it every time. I don't know why I say it every time, but that's what the YouTubers say, and so that's why I'm saying it. So welcome back to the channel. I have brought back a very important guest, very high-minded, upstanding, Clark Kent looking like guest, Donovan Fowler. He is here today to talk about Disney remakes. Have they flopped? Are they a good idea? Should we just stop going to see them altogether if they ever come back in the theaters? We don't know at this point. I wanted to go over these with you, and I think you were actually the one who came up with the idea originally. I want to give credit where credit is due, but
thank you. My ego, thanks you.
Yes, we wouldn't want to bruise that. It's just kind of like they set up these standards. Like, I was really excited to go and see Cinderella. I was really excited to go see Beauty and the Beast. Spoiler alert, I wasn't overly excited about a lot of these remakes. I thought Cinderella was pretty good, and then other than that, I haven't been overly happy with a lot of these. So where do you think Disney goes wrong just generally with these Disney remakes?
Yeah, it's funny. The one thing that I keep coming back to with all these is that they scale down the original. Is grandeur the right word for like the original stories that were done in the cartoons? This goes in terms of like characters, like Cinderella, the mice are, sort of more of like side characters. They aren't actually like present in the whole thing. In terms of environment, in Aladdin, the desert is like so much less fantastical and like, magical than in the cartoon. In terms of from the Mulan trailer and from Beauty and the Beast, I can say that like if you just line up the scenes side by side, there's just an epicness that's missing. And in terms of moments, and I'll call out those moments kind of bit by bit as we go through. Full disclaimer, I haven't seen Beauty and the Beast, and I haven't seen Lady and the Tramp, and then there was one other that I hadn't seen. I guess maybe it was Mulan. But
Mulan hasn't come out yet. So.
And the Maleficent sequel I didn't see, because at that point it's like, okay, you're basically. But I did see Maleficent. But yeah, I would say honestly, I'm just gonna go with the buzzword is epicness. I think they've scaled down the epicness because they either are going for this weird sort of realism. It's when you try to make fairy tales realistic. And it's like, well, it's a fairy tale for a reason. Like there is something about Lord of the Rings, like Peter Jackson wanted to make it a world in which the history seemed real and everything. But he still was like, this is going to be true to what Tolkien originally wanted, which is that it's a fantasy, it's a fairy tale, it's a Beowulf kind of like epic story. So anyways, it's not a found footage movie, out in Middle Earth. Not to say that that's what Disney did with theirs, but I do feel like it comes out as like more vanilla than anything. Like it's less strong. The last point that I'll make is that a lot of these movies don't really seem like they have anything to say. Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid had like very clear themes that they were going with. The early cartoons were very much personally affected by Walt Disney and like feelings for like his mother, like with Bambi and like things like that. With these, you really just get the sense of like they want to remake it to get the money because it's easy. It's an easy formula. And on top of that, their only go-to to make it special is to add like a social justice Easter egg in there, which is very trendy and not very like enduring. So
yeah, it's more of a stick in your eye rather than here's something to make you feel emotionally attached to this thing. It's like, oh, and then there you go. The best like realization of what you're trying to say, I found in the remake of The Jungle Book, because The Jungle Book as a kid, that was between Beauty and the Beast and the Jungle Book, those two were my favorite cartoons of all time. The Jungle Book, I mean, you can ask my parents. I used to dance to it as a 3-year-old all around the house. I loved that movie.
What was your favorite song out of the Jungle Book?
Oh, The Bare Necessities. Are you kidding? That was my favorite song.
Of course. How else are you going to scratch your back unless
exactly.
you do it against a palm tree?
100%. And so here's my biggest problem. I was really pissed off when I came out of the remake of that movie because Baloo didn't die. And that, it's like what you were saying about,
oh yeah,
there was a point to these movies. There was a message that was trying to be conveyed, or there was a life lesson trying to be conveyed. In the original cartoon, Baloo gives up his life for Mowgli, and obviously he comes back to life at the end.
I mean, Baloo is Jesus, basically.
Yes. My dad would call him the Christ figure in the Jungle Book story.
You want to get deep about it.
If you want to get deep about it. But they took that completely out of the movie, out of the remake. And so I came out of it and I was like, why did I just watch that? Because there really wasn't a point to the movie having taken that out.
I went for the Jungle Book, and I'll say this, out of all the remakes, Cinderella and the Jungle Book, I felt like were the two where I at least wasn't like outraged by what was going on. With Jungle Book, I was at least entertained. I think Jon Favreau is a good filmmaker and he's a good storyteller. There's a couple of epic moments from the original Jungle Book that just aren't there. It's not having the same impact. And I totally actually forgot. You're absolutely right about Baloo's sacrifice. Like that, I was watching it with my niece last summer, and I almost got choked up because like I realized that this movie, the cartoon is so much deeper because it deals with like development. It actually deals with like the development of becoming a man specifically. Mowgli's a man cub, and Baloo is very much like a man child. I mean, that's like using today's jargon. I mean, obviously that's a buzzword, but like he is like kind of just free and easy. He's like a hipster basically. He's like the hipster of the jungle. In the original, to quote Dr. Evil, there's nothing more pathetic than an aging hipster. There's always a moment in these cartoons that I love. And the one part in the Jungle Book that I felt like they really missed out on was Shere Khan is this terrifying like psychopath of a character. And as a child, you don't really realize that, you know, he's a charming tiger, but there's a lot of danger behind him. And the way that George Sanders voiced the character in the cartoon, it just has the cocktail party, psycho who could like strangle you in the bathroom, you know,
he's like
or something.
James Bond villain almost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a really good way of putting it. He's very, very scary for that reason. Like he turns on a dime. He becomes he's like a tiger. I mean, he becomes like the tiger is sort of the ultimate villain. It will like track you for like miles and miles and kill you for really no reason than that. One of the most satisfying moments of the cartoon is when Mowgli figures out how to defeat Shere Khan, and it's tying the fire to his tail. And it's like the moment that the fire flips in front of Shere Khan, like it's on his tail and he's like riding the back of the tiger literally, and he ties the fire to his tail, flips over him, and Shere Khan is just terrified. Like he's like horrified by this natural, you know, fire is like God's gift to man to develop the world. So it's like you just see this like this absolute satanic character just terrified by this natural occurrence, and he can't do anything about it because he's you know, an animal, and they don't kill him. He just runs off into the distance, and it's like that was satisfying enough for me as a child to know that like, oh wow, like this monster has vulnerabilities like anything else. So that was a big part. And then also it's been like 5 years or 4 years since I've seen the live remake, but they also, I feel like, downplayed the whole I will go and fetch the water, the girl at the end. I feel like that has so much more implicit meaning in the cartoon than it does in the movie. Like, and maybe it's because they want to go for the sequel in the movie. But at the end of the cartoon, you're like, oh wow, okay, yeah, he's gonna go off and he's gonna get married and he's gonna, you know, he's gonna be a man, and it's sad that he has to leave his friends behind. But this is like the boy prince becoming on his way to becoming a king. So I just feel like it has so much more meaning than, you know.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jon Favreau. I like you, but I don't like you that much.
I think that the big problem that I have with these movies, just again speaking generally, is that it goes for the visual spectacle, because there's nothing bad I can
Yes.
say about the visuals. Like Cinderella is fantastic to look at. Beauty and the Beast is fantastic to look at. The CGI for Lion King and for The Jungle Book is fantastic to look at.
Mhm.
All of it is fantastic to look at. There's no substance behind it. Like they sucked
Yeah.
all the substance out of it. That was
Yeah.
my biggest problem with Beauty and the Beast. I know you didn't finish seeing it. You've only seen parts of it, but they
Yeah.
they essentially just retold the entire story from the original cartoon. They didn't make very many changes to it, and then they sucked out like the heart and soul of it.
Hmm.
Like it was visually stunning,
Yeah.
but there was not the same impact. There wasn't the same level of the whole, the beast getting stabbed by Gaston. Like it
Yeah.
was just kind of like they did
Well,
everything they could to take the heart and soul out of the movie, and I
well,
was frustrated
let's
with.
transition to Beauty and the Beast, because I feel like we've covered Jungle Book. We may as well talk about Beauty and the Beast. Like I said, haven't seen the whole movie. And that was largely due to I really didn't have very much interest in seeing it. I love the original. I think Sleeping Beauty is now topped my list for favorite Disney cartoons, but
Mhm.
for a while Beauty and the Beast was my favorite. All you have to do is watch the first 5 minutes of Beauty and the Beast with the
Yeah,
stained glass window prologue. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
wow, that's storytelling. Like
Mhm.
you nailed it. And it's a cartoon. Like they
Yeah.
could have done whatever they wanted, but they instead were so creative to say like, let's really like, be artistic about this. So that in and of itself, I think just makes that movie so amazing. The music, the animation, like you said, the action. I mean,
Mhm.
I think one of the reasons that Beauty and the Beast was my favorite Disney movie for a while was because it had the most visceral violence of any of them. And I mean, maybe some people can argue that like Tarzan might have a little bit more, but I mean, let's put it this way. Gaston shoots the beast in the back with an arrow and then I think stabs him
Yeah,
several
he
times
stabs
and you
him.
see
He stabs him
blood.
with a dagger. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's like the true essence of what fairy tales are supposed to be. They're not supposed to shy away from the real dangers and they're not supposed to overdo it necessarily. Some fairy tales get like a little bit crazy with their
Mhm.
darkness, but in this case, like Gaston dies. It's just all very well done in the sense that like it just builds to that beautiful moment at the end where he has the transformation and basically is resurrected. So I was very skeptical of the live action one, and I think at one point I thought about seeing it, but then I saw some of the CGI and I was just
Mhm.
like, oh gosh, this is like you can tell that the beast is fake because
Yeah.
because you know what it is? It's the uncanny valley. It's like they they didn't want and it's like what I was saying. It's almost like they're stuck between this sense of like what the cartoon was, which was
Mhm.
like a really like big massive creature with
Yeah.
like very fine features. Like he
Yeah.
was a beast.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, maybe we ought to go with something a little bit more humanoid
Yeah.
and more realistic, even though obviously the beast doesn't exist in the real world. You could tell they were trying to scale it down to
Yeah.
be like, oh, this is something that you could actually see existing in the real world. And it's like, well, that's not really why it came here. And the same with Lumiere and all the characters. They were all sort of just like, they just don't have, I mean, literally, they don't have the animation that the cartoon has. And obviously,
Yeah.
it's a cartoon, but you can do it. I mean, like I was saying with like Lord of the Rings and stuff, like those characters they are animated, like
Yeah.
they have personality and all the hobbits from from one from the other, the orcs, and the villains based on what you see and you're like, wow, that's really characteristic. I guess just to cap it off, I saw the scene where Gaston was singing
Mhm.
and that's what really was ultimately what turned me off because I was just like the part where Gaston's singing in the cartoon is just burgeoning with masculinity, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, you can call it toxic masculinity or
But that's
whatever.
the point. That's
But
what the
like,
character is.
yeah, that's the point. Yeah, exactly. There's just something there that's like so outlandish. In the movie, it just seemed so tame. It seemed
Mhm.
like such a like, okay, we're just gonna have the camera pan around and like kind of capture this in wide shot and
Mhm.
not really. I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong. Some people like this movie, but honestly, I was hoping even like for like give it to the Moulin Rouge guy, Baz Luhrmann. Like give it to
Yeah.
somebody like can, actually like kind of
Give it to a
capture that
real man is what he's trying to
eclectic.
say. And I'm
I
gonna
don't
say
know about I don't know about Baz Luhrmann. I don't know much about him, but that like give it to somebody who has the ability to like really just bring out these,
yeah.
feelings the way that anyways. So that
Yeah,
was how
no,
I felt.
I agree with you because I think that Gaston was miscast. I laugh at this because Gaston is actually my sister's favorite character from Beauty and
Yeah.
the Beast above all else. I cannot tell you why, but he wasn't Gaston. He's supposed to be the definition of toxic masculinity, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to go there because what's his name, Luke Evans.
Yeah.
He's not like
Didn't they
it's.
give him PTSD or something?
I
Like,
don't
didn't they
know.
imply that he had PTSD from being like a soldier? It was
Yeah,
such
I
a
mean,
cop out.
Luke Evans. He didn't have the build. He did just across the board with the entire movie. My big frustration is it was like they were just going through the motions of acting out this great fantastic movie, and they were just like it's like they're on a really bad stage play.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was really frustrating.
Yeah, and I mean the live action thing, Disney has done it. Like they've done it
Yeah,
before. Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of
yeah,
the Black Pearl. That movie had it was like bursting from the screen. Like when Jack Sparrow that the first time when he says this will be the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow and then he flies up on the crane and like he swings around as a kid, I just remember thinking, wow, this is exactly what I want out of an action adventure movie. So it's
yeah.
like it can be done, but I feel like it once again harkens back to I think Disney is playing it safe on a bunch of different levels, but
Mhm.
I don't think they want to actually risk much by going too big.
Yeah, or because I could talk about Beauty and the Beast all day long, but when I went into the movie just based on the promotional material beforehand, it made it look like they were going to do an actual story about Stockholm syndrome,
Oh
like
yeah.
super dark and like
Yeah.
creepy, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I've always wanted, and no one's ever given me the actual Stockholm syndrome.
This is what every child wants, a
This
movie
is
about
very
Stockholm syndrome.
yes.
But no, I mean, you're to your
Yeah.
point. I mean, like in this case, it's for adults and kids both. So you can get away with doing stuff like that,
Yeah.
without making it overt.
But they didn't do that, and that my biggest frustration
Yeah.
was they didn't like take a nice little different spin on it. They didn't
Yeah.
enhance anything. They just tried to like status quo, we'll soften some edges here because we don't want to offend the feminists, and then we'll put a gay character in here, or we'll imply that he's gay.
Right.
He's dancing with a man because
Right.
men never dance with each other, even
But
in
we'll cut it out of the Saudi Arabian cut because you
yeah,
don't
we'll
want
cut it
to.
out of the Chinese cut because
Yeah.
they have a problem with that.
Oh yeah,
Now,
right.
one other thing, and actually Steven Crowder made this point way back in the day
Oh,
when
I
it
remember
came
watching
out.
his video. Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about why are there a bunch of black people?
It's true.
It's
true.
like because it's not period accurate. I'm not
Yeah.
against having black characters in a movie, but it's not period accurate, and
Listen,
it's really frustrating.
this can even transition us into Cinderella.
Yeah.
Cinderella had Asian people and I think black people in it, right? But
That was in the 1995 version they did. I don't remember
Really?
Yeah, the 1995 version. That was the one with Whoopi Goldberg.
oh, Brandy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. But in the Disney one, the guy who's like the assistant to
Oh, right. Yeah.
the prince. But here's the thing about that: it wasn't in your face. You
Yeah.
know, it's something that Kenneth Branagh has done
Mhm.
ever since Hamlet, I think, or Much Ado About Nothing. He didn't do it in Henry V because, rightfully so, I think. Well, he could have gotten away with it, but I think he wanted to make that like true to sort of the era. It was like Henry V is an amazing piece of work. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's like it's the perfect example of like merging stage and cinema. It's just so flippin' good. But anyways, he also did this movie Hamlet, which is obviously an adaptation of the stage play. There were a lot of like different, like there was like Jack Lemmon was in there. He had like black people in there. He had I don't know if he had any Asians in there, but he's always been big about, I think, including everybody. And it works because you kind of understand that these they have a theatrical nature to them. With Cinderella, I was sort of like, oh, that's Kenneth Branagh, like doing that. Like he kind of does that. It didn't bother me as much, maybe just knowing that. Also, I felt like the guy who played the prince's assistant, I like him as an actor, and I thought he was good. So it didn't take me out of the movie so much. But like in Beauty and the Beast, I can see how like you're selling it as like this provincial French town. You know, it doesn't necessarily exist in a fantasy.
Multicultural provincial French town from what is it, the 1500s or whatever? I don't even know.
And people get so upset when like Matt Damon is in like a Chinese movie, and it's like you don't understand. I mean, you know, it's almost like I said, I give Disney the understanding of like, okay, I get it. You're trying to push inclusivity. Fine. Yeah. You know, whatever. But like in the case of like Matt Damon in The Wall, it's like, oh, they're trying to get money because Matt Damon's a big star. You know, it's like otherwise if they had somebody who could pull in as much who was Chinese, they'd probably put him in there. But they, you know, for whatever reason, Matt Damon's in there. It's not really much of a race thing. It's more of just it's an economic decision. But so anyways, with Cinderella, what were your thoughts on Cinderella? Because you said you liked that one.
Yeah, that one was my favorite one. I was really happy with that. I think I went and saw it more than once in the theater.
I've seen it a couple times.
One of the reasons I liked it was because they did actually take a little bit of a different spin on it. They gave us backstory with her dad, which was something that actually interested me, as opposed to in Beauty and the Beast, where they gave us backstory about her mom, and we're all like, yeah, we didn't care about her mom because her mom didn't have anything to do with her. Yeah. Her dad actually did have something to do with her, and there was like a period of time in the cartoon between when her dad married the stepmother and her dad dies, and then we find her in the situation she's in where we didn't know what happened, and they actually filled that in, and I thought that was actually well done and interesting to me. And then the second element that I liked was the fact that they added this in. This was not in the original cartoon, but her turning around to her stepmother and saying that she forgives her at the end.
Oh yeah, that was nice. Yeah,
that was a really nice take on.
Very Christian.
It was, and it was very surprising to me from a Disney movie. But I liked that addition to the movie. I thought it enhanced her character rather than detract from the story. Yeah. And I didn't feel like it was the word for word retelling of the original cartoon, which I also appreciated. They did not do that in Beauty and the Beast, and that's why I often compare and contrast those two movies, because I just thought Cinderella was handled a lot better. And then they kind of got hung up in the, we just need to churn these out. I realized when making my list that they've released at least one of these remakes every single year. They're just churning them out.
Yeah, they're churning them out.
Yeah. Cinderella was the first one, and it seems like that they spent the most time to get it right. And then Jungle Book was 2016, Beauty and the Beast 2017.
And then I think Maleficent was between the two, right?
Maleficent, let me see.
I think that was 2014.
That was 2014, yeah. Was that Disney though?
It was Disney, yeah. It was the remake. It was their remake of Sleeping Beauty. But to your point on Cinderella, yeah, I definitely like. My sisters really like Cinderella. I enjoyed it. I thought it was beautifully shot. I like Kenneth Branagh a lot, as I've said before. I think his work lately has been not great, and I think he needs to get back to Shakespeare. Like, I think he needs to start doing more stuff like that. But I did like Thor, and Henry V is one of my favorite movies. Cinderella, I thought, was a good example of him, like bringing it into sort of a, focusing on the story, not trying to, like there was no massive conflict that sometimes they try to inject in these stories. The one thing about it that still bothers me is the larger problem that I have with all of them. And it's that it just seems a little soft. It's just like, it's a little like you said, she forgives her at the end, but there is just no punchiness to some of the stuff that happens. There's a great part in the original, the stepmother trips the guy who's carrying the slipper when they're taking it around. They're having it tried on everybody's feet. And I was even like, oh, dang, like that sucks. Like,
Yeah.
great. And I had forgotten the twist, which is that Cinderella has the other slipper because
Yeah.
naturally she was wearing it, at the time. And she takes it out and she says, I have the other slipper. And it's just this low angle zoom on the stepmother's face where it's just like, bruh, and it's just like, and she's just like, oh my gosh, like it's like her worst nightmare,
Yeah.
and it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying. Once again, it's not like Cinderella took out a 44 Magnum and shot the stepmother, in the chest. But it's like it's the editing equivalent of that. Like they just nailed it. That was the one thing that I was really missing about that, was like that final kind of punch, or even like some of the original stuff. Also, the music is all missing because they don't want to make it musical, which I understand. Like Beauty and the Beast, I guess, did, and it was super vanilla. They auto-tuned everybody.
It's so bad because Emma Watson can't sing.
Yeah, she can't sing.
So,
and she's not even that. I mean, let's be honest. Emma Watson, she's pretty, but I'm not going to like look at her and be like, oh, you're the most beautiful woman in the country. Yeah. Like, that's not like, I mean, Belle is supposed to be like the most like beautiful, like maiden in the land. I'm not just trying to dump on Emma Watson here, but yeah, so Cinderella, I'd give it, I find it rewatchable. Like, I find it more rewatchable than the Jungle Book. It's probably the best out of the bunch.
I agree with your point on the Wicked Stepmother. I think she was badly cast just because
Kate Blanket.
Yeah, I mean, she just was not the right person for that role. I understand that she's, a big name actress. She was Galadriel and all of that. And I think that's actually something that wasn't in her favor because people look at her as this nice character.
Yeah.
And even the people making the movie did not want her to be that evil.
Right.
And they ended up making her evil later on because she played a character in Thor Ragnarok. She played the God of Death or whatever. And she was evil in that movie, although I also thought she was mediocre in that movie because I'm a bad person. But my point is, I don't want to see Kate Blanchett in that role, and I was frustrated that she was cast in it.
Angelica Houston was better in Ever After, that Drew Barrymore movie. It's a good one. It's actually, if you're looking for a pretty good, I'd say it's good on the same level that this one is good, in that it was like sort of a modern period piece retelling of the Ever After story in a little bit more of the Cinderella story in a little bit more of a realistic context. So there's like no magic in it or anything like that. Speaking of which, Helena Bonham Carter is in the remake as well. She was okay. She was okay. She wasn't like, I like I said, I forget about these people. I mean, I find them all sort of forgettable. But anyways, Ever After is good. I think the
bottom line for me with all of these things is just that I didn't go home and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was such a good movie. Like I did go home and I felt, reasonably satisfied with Cinderella, but with none of these other ones have I felt like that. I haven't watched Aladdin, not because I don't have it available to me, but just because I've been let down on a lot of these.
Well, I can tell you about Aladdin. And I gave that one a fair shake. I will say that much. I made myself a frozen pizza and had a 6-pack of beer, and I was like, let's go. Let's go, Guy Ritchie. I'm ready to see what you can do. Like a good example, like in quarantine, I've found myself rewatching movies that have inspired me in the past. Like Fellowship of the Ring, I went and saw that in theaters actually last week when they reopened one of the movie theaters. That I just was like, yeah, that movie is just one of the greatest. And even Batman Begins and the original Star Trek remake, I was not a Trekkie, but like, and I wasn't like, I was a big Batman fan, but it wasn't like I was waiting on pins and needles for Batman Begins to come out. I actually thought it was going to be soft the way that I'm talking about a lot of these movies, but I went into theaters and I saw those and I remember just being blown away when I came out. I was just like, that exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
And granted, I mean, the sequels didn't quite follow up the way that I wanted to, but those are very special moments because I remember like it just, and they all had precursors. Like Batman had precursors that I could have been like, oh, it's not the 1989 version or whatever. It was just a good example of like they gave it a fresh take and they really gave it character and it worked. But Disney is great.
I'm currently jealous of you because we haven't had our theaters open here in California, and I'm weeping inside.
See, this is why we have family-owned theater chains out here, and they're basically just like, oh, let's do it. Let's like you just come on in. Talked about Maleficent. We can give that a quick go around. I'll tell you about Maleficent because so it is Disney. Technically it's a Disney remake because it's their take on Sleeping Beauty, which. I think they found, I can bet you that somebody saw Sleeping Beauty and was like, this is too traditional. Like we have to change it up. Because it is maybe outside of Cinderella and Snow White. I don't know. I mean, granted, they redid Cinderella, so maybe they just thought, oh, we'll get creative and we'll tell it from the villain's point of view. But let me just say this. Out of all the villains to pick to give their own like sympathetic story, Maleficent is probably the worst villain to pick because she is literally the one who calls on all the powers of hell to turn herself into a massive dragon to basically fight, the powers of good. So it's like I always thought that like when I saw that they were doing that, I was just like, what the hell? Like seriously?
So I haven't seen Maleficent.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I didn't want to see it is because they have a tendency to dumb down these iconic villains into sob stories, as you say, like, oh, the sad backstory, oh gosh, and my mom died, and I didn't get the job I wanted, and I didn't graduate high school, and I had a baby out of wedlock, and so then I decided to call on all the powers of hell. Somebody
cut off my wings, which is what happens to her. She basically gets, it's basically it's a metaphor for date rape in the thing, and it's like it's pretty obvious, but like somebody cuts off her wings while she's sleeping. They like drug her and cut off her wings. I also saw it during it wasn't like a traditional theater experience. There's this thing called Benson Interruptions where Doug Benson, who's a comedian in LA, he'll sit down with other comedians in a movie theater and they'll watch the movie and have microphones and they'll like make fun of the movie as they're watching it. So I think I went and saw it in that context, but I actually was trying to follow the story and see if it was good, and it wasn't good. It just wasn't. They departed way too much. They flipped it so that, everybody who was good in the original was evil. The prince was nowhere to be seen, which, I mean, that part, oh man, I mean, there's in the original Sleeping Beauty, there's a great metaphor for kind of arrested development. And this is probably me reading too much into it, but there's a part in the original Sleeping Beauty where the prince is chained up in the dungeon of Maleficent's castle. And she goes down and visits him and paints out a picture of how it's all going to play out. And basically says time will pass. She will remain the same. Like she'll be perfectly preserved. And how basically she says, how I'm going to get my vengeance on you is I will leave you down here to grow old and I will let you out and you'll ride out with your shield and your sword and your horse, but you'll be, an old man and you'll basically go up and you'll be you'll be 80 years old and she'll be the same. You'll have wasted your life down here. Yeah. And I watched it recently and I found it like kind of an interesting metaphor for what I think like pornography and like bad stuff that a lot of young guys get into, and they don't really realize that they're sort of like getting into this time warp of of just throwing their lives away on these sort of meaningless pleasures that are not real.
Yeah.
And eventually you figure it out and you come out of it and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm like, so much older and I've lost all this time and, I've got to make up for it. So there is something, as with most fairy tales, there's like a kernel of truth there that I think they really missed out on. And I just, that's one of the reasons that I like the original, along with the fact that it has an epic battle between, a knight and a dragon at the end.
Yeah. I mean, I think Maleficent is one of the scariest villains, if not the scariest villain.
Yeah.
Maybe the Snow White Queen, possibly, because she will forever to this day haunt my nightmares. But
Maleficent is literally satanic.
Like, yes, she is. She is the incarnation of Satan in any Disney movie like that we've ever seen, and like the whole thing where like just the visual element in the cartoon where she becomes the dragon and she has to be killed with the sword of truth or whatever. Like, it's very Christian. Which is, again, unusual for Disney. But then the thing that always creeped me out about the original cartoon was when she dies, she disappears into just black. Like, there's that black puddle, basically.
Yeah, it's like a black,
still there. And that, I just thought that was so creepy.
Yeah.
And I again, very spiritual, very much story of good and evil with a Christian theme in it. And I, again, haven't seen the movie, but I don't want to see a movie where I'm made to sympathize with the devil, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what this character was supposed to be about. This character was supposed to be absolute evil. And just to compare it with, like, in the Chronicles of Narnia, you have the White Witch. She's also supposed to be representative of Satan in that story. They did give her a backstory, like not Tolkien. C.S. Lewis did give her a backstory, but it wasn't a backstory to say, oh, well, she had a hard life and she had a hard time, and it was to say she has been this evil all this time. Do not feel sorry for her.
Yeah.
And so that's fine, but like to do that with Maleficent and to say, oh, we need to sympathize with the incarnation of Satan in these stories, I'm just like, I don't need this.
Well, it's very postmodern to have to believe that, you know, every incarnation of evil in the world, that there was like, it was somehow taken, like the goodness was somehow ripped from them by some, some supposedly wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, sometimes that does happen. I mean, granted, like sometimes people have a really bad hand given to them, and they unfortunately fall into a life of evil, but like they still have a conscience. Some people, on the other hand, are just, you know, they fully submit to it. There are some, like, you know, there is evil in the world, and there are some people who are, you just have to basically say, either they, you know, were evil from the start, or they've submitted to it, and that, you know, that was their choice. And that's where we have to draw the line. And I think, like, I mean, the biggest thing that my dogs heard evil and they started to go, crazy. But ultimately, I'll end with this. It really took away from, I think it really stole like an awesome climax that they could have had. Like, I really wanted to see that fight between Philip and Maleficent, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to see the fight between Philip and the dragon. And in the movie, it's all turned upside down and turned back to front. And I think it's really difficult to actually feel yourself getting emotionally connected in any way.
I think it's frustrating also. You mentioned the whole postmodern aspect to it. This idea that I always have a problem with, that people start out as everybody's good and then things happen and it makes them bad. And my personal belief is that everybody starts out as bad and only God can redeem you and make you good. And so when you take that, and I just don't think it, even if you're not Christian, I don't think it's realistic to assume that everybody is basically good, because your first reaction when somebody cuts you off on the road is to flip them off, just naturally. Like, you're definitely not erring on the side of, oh, I feel really sorry for them. You know, they're just having a bad day. No, you want to cuss them out because you almost hit my car.
Yeah.
That's your natural. My natural instinct is to fly off the handle when something bad.
If you were given the choice to slash their tires, you certainly would. Or not necessarily you would, but you'd consider it. Let's just say you'd consider it.
I would think some bad thoughts. Let's just say. So I don't like it when stories are told that try to imply that everybody is just basically good and it's just through their circumstances. I don't find that realistic, and it just destroys my suspension of disbelief. And then I had a completely other point that I totally forgot, so we're just gonna have to move on from that because.
All right. What the next one? What do you want to tackle next?
Let's see. So we don't need to talk about Snow White and the Huntsman because obviously, as you said before,
we can talk about it, but it needs
can't.
to be an afterthought because it's
Okay.
not Disney. It's not Disney, Kelly. I told you.
We also have The Lion King, which I have not seen, so I would like to hear your opinion on that. And then Mulan, which has yet to come out. They keep putting it off.
Yeah, I figured. Actually, I was expecting Mulan to come out in December. And by the way, full disclosure, well, I guess we'll tackle each of them. I'm breaking out the Evan Williams bourbon on this. I gotta keep myself level as I get emotional about all these childhood treasures.
I'm breaking out the cold water.
Yeah, that good, to quote Bobby Boucher from Waterboy, that good old quality H2O. Okay, so full disclosure, people are going to be so mad at me. I didn't see Lion King either.
Oh!
And now I have seen bits of Lion King, but here's what I'm going to say about Lion King. My little brother saw it, and he told me all about it. And Lion King is one of those that I hold very close to my heart as well. It's probably in my top four Disney movies. I don't want to rank them right now because I'll probably upset myself. Yeah, but so Lion King, I really like Lion King because I saw that movie in theaters as a kid, and the music, like the magic of like how they portray the African plains.
Yeah.
It's like it's so beautiful. Like it's just such a beautiful tone that they set with that movie. And the music, obviously Elton John does a great job with the actual songs, but the Hans Zimmer score is so emotional.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there's parts in that movie where I just find myself either getting super pumped up or super just in touch with myself in a weird way. Like the music that plays when Simba sees Mufasa in the sky, they have that, that communication of basically what he needs to do and everything. Then of course, man, it's not on the original soundtrack. Actually, it's on like the extended soundtrack, which you can't get on Spotify. You have to look it up on YouTube. But there's a track called Battle of Pride Rock, and it's what plays when Scar feigns retreat and he like swipes the embers in Simba's face, and then they just fully go at it. And there's like this slow motion, like with fire, like surrounded by fire, just these two lions just smacking each other with the paws, and it's Hans Zimmer taking the theme and pumping it up to 11. Like it's just so dramatic, and it's so emotional. It's just awesome. So I knew that the live action one wasn't going to make me happy, and I didn't see it in theaters. I thought about watching it on Disney Plus one day, but unfortunately Aladdin changed my mind about that. So and here's the real reason why I wasn't super jazzed about seeing it, because like we said before, cartoons give the opportunity for the animals to be animated because they're animals. If you take just regular lions and regular Serengeti and just throw it on the screen and then have the lions just start talking. I mean, I've seen it done with Babe where you can connect to animals when it's just animals talking, but even that was a little different. In this case, to me, it was like Planet Earth with talking lions. That's what I was seeing advertised, and it didn't appeal to me. Like, there just wasn't the same color and like excitement that, it just all looked a little bland and boring. I saw the Be Prepared version that they did in the movie, and that was just like, oh geez, like it's so boring. So anyways, that's how I felt about the Lion King. At least in Jungle Book, also done by Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau did Lion King, and I was curious as to how he was going to do it. I thought maybe he'd be able to pull it off because of how he did Jungle Book. But in Jungle Book, at least you had the animals interacting with a kid, which at least gave the audience some human thing to play off of.
Yeah, it scaled the movie better.
Yes, and in Lion King, I was like, no, you're going to have some pretty bad uncanny valley there. You're not going to be able to play the emotions the same. So anyways, how did you feel about it? You saw it, right?
I did not see it. My siblings went and saw it. Yeah, I mean, I think it does speak to the failure on Disney's part to really nail these movies. The fact that neither of us went and saw this one.
Yeah.
I'm not like a huge Lion King fan necessarily. I really I liked the movie as a kid, and I watched it probably 300,000 times as a kid. As an adult, it kind of lost its appeal for me.
I'm not a huge Lion King fan, but I have seen the movie 300,000.
As an adult, I didn't really enjoy the movie.
Okay, like, I see.
Seeing it later on in life, I know I did enjoy it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have any appeal to go and see it, and it probably did have a lot to do with The Jungle Book and how I was disappointed with that movie, which was a movie that I'm still a huge fan of even as an adult. And so then I was like, well, if I didn't even like that one, why would I want to go see Lion King, which is probably going to be more of the same? And that's essentially what my siblings told me after they saw it. They're much bigger fans of The Lion King in general, and they were like, yeah, it's about the same as The Jungle Book.
You know what I wanted out of The Lion King was, have you seen Black Panther?
Yeah.
And granted, people may smack me because I haven't seen The Lion King. So, but like out of what I was seeing of the movie, Black Panther has that dream sequence where he goes to see his father in like the afterlife, and it's like the sky is this weird purple glow, and it doesn't really, it looks fake, but in the sense of like not real, in the sense of like otherworldly. I'm not saying that's what they like. That's exactly what they should have done with The Lion King, but it's almost like and I'll get back to this with Aladdin as well. In the cartoon, it looks otherworldly, you know, like not every, like me being a kid from Kansas, other than what I'd maybe seen on Discovery Channel or National Geographic, didn't really know a whole lot of what the, African plains looked like. And you could even say in a way but this is the point of cinema, is that you make it look like you don't have to shoot the good, the bad, and the ugly of the place that you're in. You can cherry pick it and you can make it look like Out of Africa, for example, makes it into almost this fantastical place. And I felt like with the live action remakes in general, it's like they really just land on this like realism that just doesn't serve the fairy tale quality of the story. And I say that because Walt Disney originally set out basically to make fairy tales. I mean, that's basically what he did. He understood what it took. It's like you go to Disneyland and it's not like all these, it's not like Fantasyland has like 100% realistic looking German or French houses in it, right? They're all a little bit outlandish and kind of out there, and that's what's fun about them. So that's the way I see it.
I think there's just a balance between the realism that they wanted to bring to it and the fairy tale element, which it seems like they're running away from. That's just kind of frustrating. But
it's very frustrating.
I think we've touched on everything. I think you already pretty much covered Aladdin. I don't know if you had anything.
Okay. I just want to, I have to, every time somebody asks me about Aladdin, because here's the thing. Okay. So I will go through my list of my favorites. I'm going to say Sleeping Beauty, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Lion King. And then I might even just tag Mulan onto the fifth. If we're just going to do top five. Maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but I'm pretty sure that's about what I'd rank them. So basically, Aladdin, I was expecting Guy Ritchie. I was like, okay, Guy Ritchie, here's a guy who, no pun intended, he does the British crime drama. He knows like stories about thieves and stuff like this. And he's got a very, very interesting style. Like Guy Ritchie's style is like somewhere between Quentin Tarantino and like I don't know, I guess Scorsese. Like it's very fast paced and interesting. And I thought, well, this might actually be cool. Like it's probably not going to be the original, which I know they're not going to be able to outdo the original. So why not just do something different? And unfortunately, it didn't really seem like Guy Ritchie. Now, I don't want to say it didn't seem like he knew what he was doing, but he was either in over his head or he had one hand tied behind his back. because they made it a musical for one. Didn't really seem like it seemed like he was moving the camera intentionally faster to get out of the musical scenes as fast as possible, which was kind of funny because it was like the musical aspect of the cartoon is so fun. Like that part where you meet Aladdin and Aladdin was a big disappointment. The romance between Jasmine and the main character really didn't have any spark. You could tell it was mainly due to politics. Like they didn't want to make Aladdin the hero. They wanted to make Jasmine the hero, which I'm not, like I said, Mulan, one of my favorites, but I'm not against making a female the hero. It's just, make a decision, and if call it Jasmine instead of Aladdin, if you're gonna make her the hero. Jafar was like the worst. Like Jafar, I think most everybody can agree on this. Like Jafar was the worst villain. Like he was the white bread of villains. This speaks to the I guess the capacity for differentness that they could have gone with. Will Smith, I think, actually could have been a good genie, but I think he got caught between a weird place of, he's not going to be Robin Williams, who was fantastic as the genie. Rewatching that, I was just like, I didn't even realize as a kid how good he was. Like, I was just like, oh my God, like Robin Williams. I'm not that big of a Robin Williams fan.
Yeah.
So I was like, this guy was a massive talent and he brought it all to this role. Will Smith is a massive talent. He could have brought some serious, they could have worked with him to make it his own, but instead they got caught between this weird, like, okay, you have to be some version of Robin Williams genie, but you also have to be this character we've written for you. And it's almost like Will Smith, it felt like he was on a leash the entire time. Like, if I want, like, I wanted to see the Fresh Prince as the genie, and that's not what you got. You got like, oh, this is Will Smith, like playing by Disney's rules. So.
And that's also, again, another frustration. I use that word a lot when talking about Disney remakes, unfortunately. But I think that when you're trying to have, I mean, even just overall, when you're trying to fill the shoes of Robin Williams, or you're trying to fill the shoes of the people who voiced the characters in Beauty and the Beast, or whatever movie it
they had to bring James Earl Jones back for Lion King because they threw their hands up and were like, we don't know what else to do here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, why are you remaking these movies if you're just going to like shoot yourself in the foot and not make it your own and just kind of cripple yourself with, it has to be either exactly like shot for shot remake, which is what Beauty and the Beast looked like. It was a shot for shot remake of the original, or we're going to change things so that we're taking like core elements out of the movie. I mean, I'm all for change. Yeah,
it's all about money.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be that guy, but it is all about money.
That guy.
Like Bob Iger basically was like, okay, I need to leave my mark on the Walt Disney Company, but I need to do it in the most easy way possible. And he was basically just like, oh, I'll just take what's been done. I'll stand on the shoulders of geniuses.
Yeah.
And I'll stand on the shoulders of geniuses with a diversity and inclusion sign.
Yes.
Me. And that's basically what he's done. It's like, that's all it is.
Just to kind of round the whole thing out, we do have Mulan. I don't really want to talk about Lady and the Tramp because
Lady and the Tramp, here's the thing. Lady and the Tramp looked like the cinematography was nice. I love that era that it takes place in. Like it's not Victorian, it's I think Edwardian. But obviously the original Lady and the Tramp is great.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason that they released it to Disney Plus, straight to Disney Plus before all the COVID thing happened. Like it was on Disney Plus before that. So it clearly wasn't up to snuff. It was a made for DVD remake. So we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I don't plan on seeing it. It was another one of those slap in your face. Oh, we're gonna make it's Jim Deere and Darling. We're gonna make Darling black, so it's an interracial couple. Which I'm sorry, I am the most pro interracial couple person there is on the planet, and I do not like that. It's not. I'm sorry. It's not
Do you also have black friends, Kelly?
I do, yes. Believe it or not, I know you
just
do.
making sure. Full disclaimer:
Yes,
Kelly has
yes,
black friends. She's also pro interracial couple.
It's just frustrating. Like,
Don't
I
cancel.
want these things to be period accurate, and they're not.
Yes.
Just
yeah.
like,
It's
don't
distracting.
Yeah,
it is distracting. It's and it's a cop out. You know, it's like if you want to make movies with other cultures, make movies with other cultures. It's like, you know, I wasn't clamoring for a white guy to be cast as Aladdin. I know people can argue that that's different or whatever, but like, I just, you know, I feel like you have a diversity of culture in your library, and you don't have to shoehorn stuff in. I just I see it as a little bit. It's and you know that it's not coming from a real place. So yes, I agree with you on that with Lady and the Tramp. I mean, maybe if a baby showed up on my doorstep and like with a note saying, "Hey, this is your long lost child," I'd be like, okay, like turn on Disney Plus. I guess we'll figure this out. You know, we'll start watching these movies and you know, this is how I'm gonna raise you. But yeah, not gonna watch Lady and the Tramp. What was the so Mulan?
So
is that the only one we have left? Mulan?
Yeah, Mulan hasn't come out yet, obviously, and it keeps being moved back. So my question for you is, are you actually gonna go see it when it does come out? Because I don't even like. Is this gonna be good? Is it not? What's going on here?
So here's the deal. Okay, here's the deal. Mulan has a very special place in my heart because Mulan, that's a movie that I remember as a young lad. Obviously, the main character is female, but it had an epic like nature to it.
Yeah.
Like Shan Yu, I think, is the villain. Is that Shan Yu? Yeah. And he's basically supposed to be a cross between, I think, Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan. Mm-hmm. And man, when he shows up, the opening of that movie is it's such a good hook. It's and there's no pun intended there because they use these like grappling hooks to get on the wall, and then the Chinese soldier, you know, yells to light the lamps that are gonna the fires that'll alert everybody.
The beacons of Gondor.
Yeah, and basically, and then he realizes, I think, that his friends are all dead, and he barely gets to the top, and then he throws the fire into the oil, and it just lights up, and you see Shan Yu like low angle come up to him, and he's just this massive like savage. And the guy says like, now all of China knows you're here, and then Shan Yu just takes the Chinese flag and burns it and just goes perfect. And like, it's just like, you're like, okay, that's like the best villain, because you're like, wow, that's pretty scary. Like, he's ready to go, like he's good to go all the time. On top of that, you have very dramatic, you know, hero's journey stuff that's pretty devoid of feminist politics, despite the fact that, you know, sex did play a big part in the story. Most of it was pretty, you know, there's some of it in there, but it wasn't overarching. It wasn't enough to turn me off as a kid. So
I think there's actually a little bit more of realism with the Mulan movie, in the sense that you don't necessarily understand this as a kid, but as an adult, you look at it, and basically what Mulan is doing by taking her father's place in battle is she is signing her death warrant, because theoretically a woman is not going to be physically capable of fighting men on the battlefield in the same way.
And if she gets caught, she's going to be executed.
Yeah, so she's essentially saying, I'm going to give up my life so that my dad doesn't have to go and fight in this war.
Yeah.
Obviously she survives, but like, again, it's more of a realistic, like, this is her sacrifice that she's making, rather than she is a strong female woman and she is going to go and she's going to take on the whole army.
You know that like the first like 10 minutes of the live action remake is going to have some like something where she does something like overtly or subliminally masculine to like be like, it's like in the Jane Austen remake where it's like, oh, she's playing cricket because she's, you know, she's not typical, you know, 16th century British woman or whatever. I think actually Jane Austen lived in the 19th century. Neither here nor there, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about the Jane Austen Disney remake when that comes around. But my point is that I often just find myself rolling my eyes because they do go simple pandering with a lot of this stuff.
Mhm.
And in the original, it was just like she's a very clever young woman. Like she's
Yeah.
exceptional because she's clever. She wants to fit in. It's not like she's a rebel. You're
Yeah.
right. Like she wasn't just joining the army because she felt like she was transgender or she was like super masculine. She wanted to fit in. She wanted to please the matchmaker, but she ultimately naturally was meant for different things. And she
Mhm.
found that through sacrifice, you
Yeah.
know? And that's the story of everybody. It's like, you may be a little bit different. You may have a different purpose. It's not always going to be laid out for you, but once you kind of make the sacrifices in your life, you find yourself sort of on the path that you're meant to be on. That's the beauty of the original story. I'll just say this. I originally, when I saw the trailer and it was upcoming in March, I was like, this actually looks like a movie where I could go see it. And I said the same thing about Aladdin because it was colorful and it seemed to have adventure. Like I was almost thinking Aladdin was going to be kind of a Pirates of the Caribbean-esque action adventure movie.
Mhm.
I feel like now that I have reality checked myself with Aladdin again, I am less likely to see it because I did see the trailer for Mulan when I was in theaters for Fellowship, and I just noticed a few things. One, they've completely taken out the male antagonist. Well, not completely, but they've taken the male antagonist and they've demoted him.
Mhm.
So Sean Yu is no longer the big baddie that he was, which to me is a big problem.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they've moved in this witch character who I think doesn't look very compelling, and I think she looks kind of forced, like
Mhm.
the forced evilness of her. Maybe I'm wrong there.
My understanding with this remake is they wanted to get a little closer to the actual Chinese
Oh,
story. And
okay.
so I have some hope that maybe that's why these changes
Yeah,
are being made, because they wanted to be a little more authentic. This was supposed to be kind of the token for the ever growing Chinese audience that Disney has.
yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why they keep pushing the movie back, because they want Chinese people to go and see the movie, because this was supposed to be the big Chinese movie for them.
Well, it
So
also
I don't know.
looks
We'll
it,
see.
it also looks like they're not overly relying on CGI
Mhm.
from a lot of the trailers I've seen, which is a plus in my regard. I think the world actually looks real and interesting to a certain degree,
Mhm.
but even then, it just there's just always something about these Disney movies that just feels like they're holding back
Yeah.
in a big way. Like I saw the trailer and I saw how her parents were talking and everything. And obviously it's a trailer, so who knows. But
Mhm.
I was just like, this just doesn't have the same gravitas when
Yeah.
they say, like, if they discover her, like she says, we have to go after her, she could be killed. And then the father says, if they discover her, she will be. And then
Mhm.
it cuts on that. In the trailer, I think they have a similar scene play out, and it feels like the director almost like didn't get as close as he should have with
Yeah.
that line. And as far as the action goes, I saw some scene where like ninjas were like, you know, running down walls and stuff, and it
Mhm.
just seemed like, one, it looked really fake. I hate to say
Yeah.
it. Like, despite the fact that it wasn't CGI, it looked pretty fake. And two, I was just like, oh, okay, now we need ninjas in the story. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, like, I don't know. It's missing some texture, and I feel like it's more than likely they're not going to take the risks that they want to because
Mhm.
of the China market and also because it's Disney, and it's going to come out as a very vanilla kind of, production.
Which is really what all of these movies have turned out to be, just because Disney is kind of like, these movies are not to make a statement. They're not to actually tell a story as much as they are just to make money and to sell it to as many specific audiences as possible. And
Yeah,
so, they're checking the LGBT box in certain ones. They're checking the Chinese box in certain ones. They're checking
right.
this, checking that. And so it's just like, why can't we just make movies and make them and just so that general audiences can watch them is my question. Why do we have to pander to, okay, so this one's the one for the Chinese audience, and this one's the one for, so we'll put LGBT and Beauty and the Beast, and then we'll put like a little bit of a Christian theme in the Cinderella one so that they'll be happy for a little while. And then we'll put this in here, and it's tiresome, and it's uninteresting, and it's condescending at the end of the day. Stop mansplaining, Disney.
Just make sure that there are no ghosts or time travel in the in this Mulan, because the Chinese will ban it. Or Winnie the Pooh. Wouldn't that be hilarious if Winnie the Pooh, if they like stuck some Easter egg in there? I mean, if Disney had any balls, which they don't, they'd stick like, you know how in Pirates of the Caribbean, like the cannons fire and it forms like a little Mickey Mouse ears or whatever. And you're like, oh, it's Mickey Mouse. That's fun. It would be hilarious if Winnie the Pooh like turned up in the sunset or something like that. And
it's so funny.
Oh, I'd do it. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
This is why you don't work for Disney.
It's also, I mean, I've never wanted to be the guy who's like, you know, like Disney is corporate, but like there is a corporate side of this that does ruin the art of it. And I'm not saying that they can't be married. I mean, clearly Disney had a renaissance where they were able to do it very well. Even then, you could argue that the Disney Renaissance is slightly watered down and more just cinematic than any of the previous fairy tales that they were telling. But at least they were different, you know. At least they had a lot to offer. They had good soundtracks. They had good production design in the animation and everything. I mean, and they had something to say. So I don't know. I mean, I guess what's one story, now that we've gone through all of them, let me ask you, what's one story that hasn't been told that you would, I don't want to say like that you'd want to be told, because I feel like we've already established that they screw all this stuff up.
Yeah.
But what's one story that like you'd almost rather it be sacrosanct and they just not even touch it?
Well, it's funny you asked this, because I actually thought about this question yesterday when I was writing down what I wanted to talk about. One story that I really like that Disney has not made this story, but somebody else did. I can't remember which company put this out, but I love the Swan Princess story. And
Swan Princess, yeah.
Yeah, I think the villain it's another one of those. It's got one of those really creepy villains, really like embodiment of evil type villains, and then the whole thing about how she's got to be on the lake at a certain time or she's gonna explode or whatever. I'm obviously telling Kelly's version of this story.
We should have a new podcast. Kelly tells fairy tales based on what she remembers from being a kid. Well, she's got to be the swan has to be on a lake at a certain time, or else it's going to explode. I think there's some TNT involved. I don't know.
Yes, this is the way that I like to tell stories. But I love that story, and I would not want to see it retold in some sort of pathetic, mediocre milquetoast way. And so that would be my suggestion. It's one of my favorite non-Disney movies that's a cartoon.
I would say The Country Bears from 2000. No, I'm kidding. The Country Bears. Do you remember The Country Bears?
I think so.
It was actually a live action movie, and it was very, very mediocre. Not to say I've seen it. I'm a great reviewer of movies that I haven't seen. I think that's one that everybody can, we can leave that in the vault. Also, Song of the South, I think.
Oh my gosh.
I got to touch that one with a 10-foot pole because, one, I haven't seen it, and two, don't want to get canceled.
I haven't seen Song of the South, and it's amazing that one's still available to watch.
Yeah, I will say it's a crying shame that they're changing Splash Mountain, because I think, one, it has nothing to do with racism other than being attached to the Song of the South. It's an original story from slaves. I just think it's a perfect example of people erasing culture when there's anything problematic about it, which, as we know, everything's problematic. So, why, look, John Wayne's behind me, problematic, cancel me. I would say maybe Pinocchio. It would be between Pinocchio and Peter Pan. And I'm actually really surprised that they haven't done Pinocchio. And
there have been live action remakes of Pinocchio, but they're not in this current iteration.
Robert Downey Jr. has been working on one for a while that, I don't know, he could be actually a pretty good Geppetto. I could see him really doing a good job with that, but I think he's been having a hard time bringing that about. I can't remember who he was working on it with, but they've been working on that since I was over at Team Downey. But so that may be the reason that Disney hasn't done it, is because there are other Pinocchios in the works and maybe they just don't want to go up against it. Joe Wright, who's actually one of my favorite filmmakers and was one of the reasons that I got into filmmaking to begin with, he did a version of Peter Pan, which I heard was awful. I haven't seen it. It's like very, very unorthodox and out there. I've always wanted a better version of Peter Pan in live action. Actually, Hook's pretty good, and the 2003 version was good. But I've always wanted a little bit more of a, I don't know, I guess maybe a little darker, but that's dangerous to get into the dark territory. So I'd say leave Peter Pan and Pinocchio alone, please.
I thought the TV show Once Upon a Time with their very dark version of Peter Pan was actually pretty good.
Oh, wait, was that the HBO
I
series?
thought that was Disney.
Was that like Once Upon a Time? Oh, no. I'm thinking of Once Upon a Time, Fairy Tales for Every Child or something, which was a very diverse, like it was like every white fairy tale was put in a different culture or whatever, which that's fun. We talked about Wishbone doing that, but ultimately, Once Upon a Time, that was the ABC show.
Yeah.
I never watched that, but I did. It seemed like they were doing some fun stuff with that.
Yeah, like this show ends up going downhill because they're like, oh, and now the characters are lesbian, and now there's this, and like obviously they always go down that route, but
I'm in. Sign me up.
Yeah, but the first 2.5 to 3 seasons are actually really good, and the third season is the whole thing with the Peter Pan stuff, and he has a super dark backstory, and it turns out that he's actually also the Pied Piper, and it's very, very interesting how they. Interesting. I would recommend the first 3 seasons of that show.
The one thing about Peter Pan that I always loved was the aspect of it that like these are all boys who don't have mothers and like there's no feminine influence. Jordan Peterson actually does a great breakdown of Peter Pan that's I would say is very worth watching, where he basically says that Peter Pan is the king of nothingness because he's got ultimate potential, but he doesn't act on it. So he's the king of the Lost Boys, which is the same as being the king of nothing. I'm actually reading the book by J.M. Barrie right now because I've never read it. And I think there's an aspect, I have to wait till I get to it, but I think there's an aspect in the book where he will kill, like if the Lost Boys actually start to grow up, he like kills them. Or something. I just always found that very, very interesting. How Peter Pan is a tyrant, despite being, you kind of have a utopia aspect to how he lives his life. You're like, oh wow, he's like so free and like he's kind of a live wire. He's like the life of the party, but in reality, he's got this darkness behind him. But obviously, that doesn't make very good children's story.
No, it doesn't.
But actually, I mean, the Jordan Peterson breakdown, if you were to take that and apply it to a live action version of Peter Pan, like Disney told it, it would work really well. A huge part of the conflict comes from the fact that Peter Pan is actually terrified of Hook because Hook is the only adult that he knows. And Hook is, he's a tyrant and he's terrified of time. He's like the clock, in the stomach of a gator and all that stuff. So it's a really interesting breakdown. That would be the one that I would have them not touch along with Pinocchio.
Well, I think we pretty much covered everything as far as Disney remakes, and it's unfortunate that we still. I was actually saving this topic so that we could make it after we both saw Mulan, but apparently we're not going to see Mulan until our children's children are.
And you know what? Let's be honest. I don't care. like I could do without it. Like I'll just watch the cartoon. Honestly, I'll just make it a double feature of Mulan and Aladdin, and I'll just be entertained. I'll entertain the hell out of myself, and then I'll go get some actual work done. Maybe I'll write a movie that's better.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Donovan. I will have the links in the description to your podcast with Jordan Crowder as usual. Awesome. People, if you liked this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell because I told you to. And that's the only reason you should be doing things, because Karen Kelly Campagna has told you you better ring that darn bell. And I will talk to you guys on the next episode.